evening to all our viewers. We should like to discuss the subject of towards the outer limits. Basically, it revolves around Tefila and Emuna, prayer and faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Point of departure, Hilchos Avelis. These are the rules and regulations, the halachas governing a time of grief, a time of sadness, insofar as someone comforting the mourner is concerned. So the Ramah states in Siman Shin Ayin Vov, Al Yoim HaRodom Lo'ovel Malacholasos Ki Efshel L'Shanois. This is totally inappropriate. What is the Ramah saying? That of course, when somebody comforts and confronts a mourner, he has to be extremely careful and very sensitive, and he should not say, it's very unfortunate, the tragedy that happened, but what can you do? Because if you add, what can you do, the Ramah says, it implies that if you could do something, you would, even though it would go against the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this, of course, is inappropriate. Yet the Taz, one of the great commentators in Shulchan Aruch, immediately mentions that when a person is alive, might be sick, even fatally sick, or you have, like we have today, hostages that are being kept in despicable, terrible places. So then, Vadai, certainly called Tatstike, the Islay, the Meva, every single device that's available for a person to do, he should undertake to do it. Emphasis, of course, is on Tefillah, prayer, Vitzaynos, and fasting. Fast day should be implemented. A person should be Mekabel a Tainus, should accept a time, mincha the day before, and yesh lo'ilodom lasais sheloi yomus, that the person should not die, the person should not, God forbid, degenerate in his health status, and the prisoners, those that are held for ransom, should be freed. So the Taz explains to us that after the event has taken place, so a Jewish person, a man of faith, is commanded to recite the formula of Tziduk Adin. Kadosh Baruch Hu is always righteous. A person has to fully accept the divine judgment. This is only insofar as it's a past event. So retrospectively, a person associates and relates to this with the guiding principle of acceptance. But prospectively, a person should undertake every single possibility, including petitioning HaKadosh Baruch Hu, fasting for the refuah of the chayla, the total recovery of the person that's sick, for the release of all the hostages. And there's absolutely no rebelliousness, like the Taz points out, in petitioning fervently for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because you do not know, says the Taz, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants sick people to die and people that are held hostages to continue to be hostages. This is the yesod of our Emuna. Now, modern philosophy, right? So we see a tremendous contrast to what is accepted halachically. Judaism never saw an antithesis between the notion of tefillah as a bakosha, tefillah, something which we implore HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we beg him, and tefillah as avodah shebalev, the service of the heart, in the sense of tefillah being the substitute for the sacrificial order. which is designated as avodah. When we speak about all the sacrifices, all the karbanos that are offered to HaKadosh Baruch Hu during the time that the Beis Hamikdash is kayom, so we call the sacrificial order avodah. Once Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so our sages say that Tefila became the substitute for avodas hakarbanos. Both are designated as avodah shebelev, as avodah, a service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing, with bakoshes, with entreaties, full-blooded entreaties, per se to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only is there nothing wrong with it, on the contrary, it's a very positive element that is involved in the act of petition. Although, basically, as most of the brachas of Tefillah is concerned, these are mostly petitions. Most of Tefillah, after the Gimel Rishonos, after the first three brachas of praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the last three of thanksgiving, all the intermediary brachas are all petition to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see at first glance that this is the opposite of the sacrificial order. The sacrificial order is called in the Gemara, Noisei Dar Lamelech, presenting HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a present. In other words, it's basically an act of giving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here we are requesting from him, and we are not giving him. Nevertheless, the Chazal saw absolutely no contradiction. Why? Because basically there are a lot of elements involved in petitioning HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help, especially in a dire situation. Many positive elements, which these elements fall in the category of giving. So the question was, how could Tefillah be called an avodah? Although we are requesting of him, we are not giving to him like by karbanos. So the answer is no, we are actually giving to him. One, the recognition through the act of tefillah, of petition, of our complete dependence upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every aspect of our lives and our existence. So therefore, this recognition and awareness is expressed in every single individual bracha. The bracha basically starts with a confession. What is the confession? About our dependence on the Rebbeinu Shalom. So if we say, Ata choyne nodam da'as, you have granted a gift of wisdom to us. So basically, what are we saying? What are we declaring? That without HaKadosh Baruch Hu granting us wisdom, we're all ignorant. We're total fools. So we have to come on to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for our intellect and our understanding. Ata choyne nodam da'as. If it's not going to be bestowed as a gratuitous gift upon us, so we will be ignorant, totally. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not heal us, indeed we will be diseased beings. So this is the first recognition that we are giving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because basically speaking, Tefillah, as we mentioned many times, a declaration of total dependence upon him. And insofar as the human nature is concerned, this is an act, an altruistic act of giving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu this recognition. Number two, we also have a recognition that we pray and beseech and petition only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there is no one else who is worthy to petition, to pray to. And this, as we all know, is one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, one of the 13 principles of faith enumerated by the Rambam. And we say it every day at the end of davening. Ani Mamin Emuna Shlema, I believe with a complete integrity, an article of faith, complete, sincerely, with total integrity, only to a Kadosh Baruch Hu is it worthy to pray vein roilis and it's not worthy to petition anyone else. So this is also a act of recognition, and this is also within the parameters and the context of giving to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Number 3, we're declaring that no one else, or is there any other power or force in the entire cosmos that can work against HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu acts exclusively according to his will. And therefore, when we pray, so our prayers are intended to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he should override and overrule the present state that we find ourselves. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu can simply negate, nullify all natural laws. In Kabbalah, mysticism, we have the famous Yesod of the Ramchal. He formulates this the best. And he explains that basically there are 2 worlds. There's a lower world and an upper world. This is supposed to be understood figuratively. The lower world is called Olam HaMishpat, the world of judgment. And here we have Schar v'Oinesh, according to divine judgment. Punishment and reward, according to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who understands what true judgment is, dispenses to us. Of course, the Ramchal points out this is according to the Mishpatei HaTorah. This is according to the laws of the Torah. This is according to the criterion of Schar v'Oinesh, of reward and punishment of the Torah. But there's a world above that, and that world is called Olam HaYichud. And that is an Olam of Chesed, that's an Olam of kindness, of Yud Gimel Midah Shel Rachamim. In that world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu conducts himself exclusively according to the 13 attributes of loving kindness. What does this mean? So the Ramchal explains to us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is not subjugated to the rules and regulations and the laws of the Torah. Even in the Torah we have rules of Schar v'Oinesh, who deserves a reward in this world as well, and who deserves punishment in this world. Nevertheless, even though these laws are prescribed by the Torah, these are Torah laws, prescribed by the Torah, from beginning to the end, nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can conduct himself within the framework of Olam HaYichud, which basically comes to its expression in the Pasuk, I will show favoritism to the one who I want to show favoritism to, and I will be compassionate to the one that I want to be compassionate to. And Chazal say, even though he doesn't deserve it. What does it mean? Doesn't deserve it? That's according to the strict judgment of the Torah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not subjugated to the Torah. He's above and beyond that. So our appeals, insofar as Tefila is concerned, so our appeal is directly to the Olam HaYichud, to the world of Yud, Gimel, Midah, Shel Rachamim, which is above and beyond the world of the Torah and Mishpat. So these are the 3 awarenesses and recognitions which we declare, and Kaviyachol is as if we are giving to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there is a genuine substitute for the sacrificial order, which Chazal tell us, as I mentioned a moment ago, is Noisei Dar LaMelech, is giving a present to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, men generally And perhaps today it became part of the DNA of men in general, of mankind, I should say, naturally do not like to feel dependent, not on others, and also, unfortunately, not on the Rebbeinu Shalom. So in contemporary times, people don't have a fear of death, even if somebody reached old age. Nowadays, somehow or other, people feel very self-sufficient and not vulnerable. Not that many years ago, so mankind was more unsure of itself. They lacked confidence. And they were actually frightened by the imminence of death. Even people that reached middle age were terrorized by the feeling of death. And of course, death is the significant proof of our dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The infant mortality rate of past generations was indeed high. And death, to a large extent, once somebody passed the middle age, stared everyone in the face. As this collective human experience disappeared, concurrently came the idea of the 20th century. This was the greatest expression in the 20th century, the idea of mastery of nature. Advances in medicine. And people felt much more self-sufficient. They started to believe in the credo of wisdom is power. And this gained great popularity in the scientific revolution of the 20th century. And of course, once this took hold of mankind, this became part of his mindset. And this basically was responsible and is responsible for the deep-seated feeling that we once had of total dependence on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore our tefillas were really genuine tefillas, wholehearted petitions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And indeed, it's remarkable what the Chazal tell us. The Medrash and Sheikh HaTayv told us that the Pinchas once said that Avodah Zarah is nearest Kroiva v'Yirachayko. Idols, for those that still have them, appear to be very close and not far. It's with them at home. And very easily a person can petition them, but they don't answer. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu ain't again. The Almighty is not that way. Nearer Rachak, he appears very far to who Korov, and he's very close. From the earth to the sky, it's 500, what they call today, light years away. And the thickness is another 500 light years to penetrate. And that's the first rakia. And after the first rakia is another 500 light years to penetrate. And there's 7 rakiim, there's 7 skies. So we know that it's Kadosh Baruch Hu would appear to be very, very far. Nevertheless, what is our faith? That the Melech Malchei Amlochim Rom V'Nisa, exalted, Sheichanad, is eternal, V'Kodesh Shemoy, and his name is holiness, Aval Pikein. Despite the fact that he's Nisa, he's Shavru Yesadako, Ushval Ruach, he dwells with the contrite and the broken-hearted people. So if we ask ourselves, where is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, especially today, in these most turbulent of times, he's Esadako, Shval Ruach, he's with us. Heartbroken, contrite people because of the tragedies that we faced. Mazin, but he listens to our tefillas. Hashem Elokeinu b'chol kareinu elov, odom niftas lebeis haknesses. Person goes into a shul, he's overwhelmed, he's transformed with the feeling that Kadosh Baruch Hu was close and he's interested in hearing God's tefillas. Accordingly, we should be grateful for the opportunity to reach out to the Rebbeinu Shalom in the framework of tefillah. We should not look at tefillah as the obligation of chayva. If we properly understood tefillah, we should indeed beg for it. We would never view it as a burden. Therefore, in summary, we approach tefillah in two capacities. One is a mitzvah, we're commanded to pray, but two, it's a great opportunity. Both incorporate as the central feature encountering HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though they're two separate strains of approach, but the second approach, the second strain of an opportunity to change the world, to change the Hanhog of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. So this is the greatest of all opportunities that a man has. There are those, no question about it, that looked askance as tefillah being requests from the Rebbeinu Shalom. We mentioned a moment ago, essentially, tefillah is bakasha, it's petition. And of course, the proof is that the 10 expressions of tefillah that's mentioned by Chazal in the Sifri and Parshas V'eschanon are all expressions of tefillah. What is tefillah? There's 10 expressions. Za'aka, screaming out. Nako, exclaiming. Pigia, begging. Tilu, these are all different types of emotions. Almost 10 levels of different types of emotions of reaching out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for divine mercy. In this light, many Jewish thinkers, like Immanuel Kant, for example, held that ideally they say that the order of bakashas should not be part of tefillah. They did away with it. What is that reason? Because they came to the conclusion we should be satisfied with what we have. So therefore, we had many philosophers, Jewish philosophers, that were anti-petition. The ideal is that a man should pursue is to give and not to take. We mentioned a moment ago the errors, an egregious error, because tefillah is giving. But if we accept chas v'sholom, but theoretically, if we would think about what the non-petition approach is, it's better to be a non-petitioner. So basically, this results from one of two stances, and both were rejected by the Torah, totally rejected. In other words, be a non-petitioner is most sinful. And it's from the most fundamental sins of the Torah, from the most fundamental transgressions that a person can make. Number one, what's the approach of a non-petitioner? He doesn't need a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's a non-mevakesh. This type of person considers himself to be independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have a declaration of independence. And by the Jewish people, if we have a declaration of independence, the meaning is independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is tantamount to Avodah Zarah, with the essential idol being man himself. In the sense that he's basically serving himself. And based on this understanding the Seder HaBakashos were not only introduced in Tefillah, but they are the essence of Tefillah, because they reflect the idea of constant human need and fallibility. Because Tefillah thus becomes a declaration of dependence totally on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Number two, what is the egregious error of the non-petitioner? This is one approach, and there's another approach. And that approach would lead us to total passivity. Whatever happens to us, we should be grateful, we should accept, and we should always think in terms of giving and not of taking. So this would lead us in certain areas, like medicine, to the conclusion of the Christian scientists, that their motto is don't interfere with natural laws, and by extension to social evils, to social ills, not just the physical ills. This premise has been totally rejected by the Torah. As the Torah states, "V'rapo yerape," a person should indeed seek medical assistance. And the Taz says once the Torah allowed it, it's a mitzvah gedolah. We're mechalo Shabbos for it. And also to free hostages were mechalo Shabbos. The Ramban says in Parshas Bechukah Isaiah that people who are fully reliable on the Rebbeinu Shalom won't require any external aid, not in the forms of medication or doctors. Nevertheless, he states emphatically, this is the ultimate ideal, and it depends on historical factors such as Yemais HaMashiach. It'll be a different world, and it'll be a different world order then. It'll be the Olam HaTikun. However, like the Rambam points out, in this world we live in the Olam HaPogum, the defective world. And therefore, this type of context simply does not apply, and it's erroneous and it's sinful. In this world, we have a mission to create good. We have a mission to blot out evil actively. We do not accept it passively. And the non-petitioner, when he doesn't petition for himself and for his fellow man, so he will be led down the path of total passivity, even in the face of total evil, like Gandhi approached passivity. Don't eradicate evil, just let it grow. It's totally irrational. And in this sense, right, so we Jewish people have to do the best that we can, to the best of our capabilities, in capacities, to become partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were. He left something for us to create, and that is to create a state of holiness, a state of justice, a state of compassion and care for one fellow man. And actively, we have to do whatever we can. And Tefillah is one of the most powerful forces we have. Tzaimis is another powerful force we have. Charity is a third powerful force we have. Demonstrations against evil is a fourth. Power that we have, and we have to do everything within our power. So in our time, in contemporary times, what do we see? So we see something remarkable. Our leaders, the government leaders, talk slogans, total demolition, total destruction of the enemy. Hamas, nobody will survive. These are the ones that unfortunately were totally negligent. The government that was never as negligent as this government. Also the military officials, also the Esadin. People were aware there was a very strong potential attack that was brewing. People saw signs of it. The government was totally, for some strange reason, in a mode to disregard everything. Billions and billions and billions of shkalim were invested in the course of the years to perfect the intelligence of the Israeli military and other branches. Everything failed, a total systematic collapse. And you would think that they would have the minimum intelligence to realize how vulnerable we are and how much we depend on the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And yet they speak in superlatives without mentioning the Ezras Hashem Yisbarach. So educated people, they got us into this mess. And the latest polls show that 90% of the population in Israel have no confidence in them they're going to get us out. Of the people that were addressed with these pollsters, most were, of course, non-religious people, secular people. However, the secularists are not totally secularists anymore. There's a tremendous undercurrent and movement of tshuva. And basically, one of the greatest inspirations and motivations for this secular Jew in Israel today to reconsider his religious life is due to the army. It's very ironic, but we saw the video clips, everybody saw it. Before they undertake a mission, and they're going into a fire, so hundreds, perhaps even thousands, line up in a military line and proclaim with the greatest enthusiasm, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. This is the rank and file. Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimlech L'Olam Poed. We have faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Deep down, we're believers that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help us. And we'll come back alive, and our wives will not be widows, and our children will not be orphans. The nekuda, that point that a Jewish person has in the depths of his soul, especially when he confronts danger. Tkiya shofar, we blow shofar. And the way they say it with such enthusiasm, every single person there. And then they say a short prayer because they don't have the time to daven. People that come from nowhere. Each one's the tinik shenishba beina akum. He has a dinner, like Chazani says, of a tinik shenishba. He was like somebody that was captured and he grew up in a total secular society. And we believe that evil environments produce evil people, secularists. Society produce secularists. Somebody comes from an agnostic background, comes from a home that didn't believe in God, or never mentioned that there's a God, never mentioned there's a hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what do we expect from him? And miraculously, one of the greatest miracles of all time, it's the rank and file that they speak in terms of Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach. Whereas the government officials and the hierarchy, unbelievably, arrogantly, vaingloriously will not mention HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, even though they're the ones that got us into this terrible, terrible potential endangering of the species of the Jewish people. So we see that this is a direction towards above and beyond. This is a direction toward the outer limits. And the soldiers are the ones that are the root of this. This is so far as Tefila is concerned. We would like to speak a little bit about Emuna. We don't have that much time, but we'd like to speak a little bit about Emuna. And not too long ago, we read the miraculous birth of Yitzchak. So the Torah tells us something very strange. That one of the three angels told Avraham by Yomel, I shall return to you in 1 year. And your wife Sarah will have a son. And Sarah eavesdropped on this conversation And now the Torah tells us that they were both old people. Avram b'Sara zakenim boim bayomim. And so when they said, with one Malach said, he shall surely return at this time next year, behold, your wife Sarah will have a son. So when Sarah heard this from the entrance of her tent, right, so the Torah tells us they were old. And Sarah ceased to have the way of women. And the Torah tells us, Eidos, testimony, that Sarah laughed within herself, saying, yet I've become worn out. I have smooth flesh, and my master is old. He's 99 years old. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram, why did Sarah laugh? Is it really true that I will give birth although I am old? That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu told Sarah. And then Avram heard something he did not want to hear. Kadosh Baruch Hu said, something hidden from Kadosh Baruch Hu, something above, beyond the omnipotent. Ben for sure, 1 year from now, I will come back and Sarah will have a child. And of course, the question naturally arises, why was Sarah censured to Avram by HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The Ramban asked this question. And the Ramban says, this is part of the question, that had it been a Rosh Hashiva, had it been a tzaddik who informed Avram that there's going to be a child to Sarah a year from now, of course she wouldn't have been in disbelief. However, Sarah Emuna was unaware, even at this point, that it was a Malach. She thought it was an Arab. Lo Yodo states the Ramban, ki Malachei El Yodim. So what's the taina? So why is she censured, criticized? Nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Heshem Yisol Avram. HaKadosh Baruch Hu indeed indicted her to Avram Avinu. Lomo Hoyo Hadover Nimna Beinel. Why did she think it's such a distant thing? Why does she think it's so far-fetched? And she should have believed it. And she should have said, Amen, Ken Yasa Hashem. So we learn a very important yesod from this parasha. Even if the Mevaser Tov, the one that brings you good tidings, is not a Malach Hashem Tzavakos, he's not an angel, he's not an Ish Kadosh, he's not a holy man. No, on the contrary, he's from the lowest element of society. She thought he was an Arab, also suspect of being Oived Avodah Zarah. So Sarah experienced a feeling that's dako min dako, very, very delicate feeling. That this is very far removed in the factual, realistic world. So it won't happen. Could be it'll happen, but vague possibility. Why could she not understand, says the Ramban? She was a greater Yodanis. She was a greater person than we are in faith in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. She realized 1,000,000 times more than we do that Kadosh Baruch Hu is omnipotent, even though we have all the scientific facts, all the proofs. Sarah Emuna didn't need it. She, like Avram, discovered the Kuchik herself, and she believed that he was an omnipotent, totally omnipotent, and there's no difference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu whether a woman 20 years old gives birth or a woman 90 years old gives birth. There's no difference. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is omnipotent. She did not need the chakiras that we have, the investigations that we have. We're so far removed from one iota of her wisdom. Nevertheless, for one moment, deep down, she felt that it was something which is a vague possibility. And for that she was censured. A low life, mamish, should wish you something good or tell you it's going to happen. Amen, Kenyas Hashem. Why? What is the Amen, Kenyas Hashem? God should do this because it shows and it expresses that we believe God is omnipotent, and there's no difference insofar as the laws of nature are concerned and what is possible to happen. And last week was the Yahrzeit, the Chazon Ish. I wanted to say this last week. The remarkable story that World War II had just broke out, 1939. So around 1940, in Yerushalayim, there was a very great Rav, Hersh Pesach Frank, who was a prominent person, very important person, and his Rebbitzin took sick. She was older, and she contacted pneumonia. And the doctors told her at that time, at her age, she was past middle age, there's a 80-90% chance that she's going to leave the world in a very short period of time. So one Mitzvah Shabbos, her brother came to visit from Bnei Brak, and they called in Dr. Isserlis. Those that are familiar with Geula, he lived on the corner of Malchi Yisrael and Malachi, and the Hersh Pesach lived down the block. He became famous because he was also the doctor of the Brisker Rov. So they called him in, and he said, Mitzvah Shabbos, she has 4 days to live, and that will end her life. So her brother lived in Bnei Brak, so he was very distraught. Traveled back to Bnei Brak, and he went to see the Chazon Ish. Told over the whole story to the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish exclaimed, "What are you so worried about? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created 2/3 of the world, Shamayim v'Oretz v'Chol Tzivon." That was the lashon of the Chazon Ish. In 4 days. That's 2/3 of Sheishes Yimei Bereishis, the 6 days of creation. So the Be'er Refuah is the one that creates medication, can't create in 4 days a medication that will be a medication and cure pneumonia. So he said to himself, it looks like the Chazon Ish did not understand a word that I was saying. No. He walked out very disappointed. And here we have a report, word for word. As we all know, Yud Zayin Elul, Tov Reish Tzadik Tes, middle of September, 85 years ago, World War II broke out, and the Russia, Yamach Shemoy, the Nazim, were continually winning. And throughout the war, the spokesman, who always spoke with great optimism, was a tremendous orator, that ultimately the Allies will defeat the Nazis, was Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England. And every Sunday, his broadcast was heard around the world, and even in Eretz Israel, which was called Palestine at the time. However, it had been a number of weeks that he had not been heard from. He simply did not have his weekly radio broadcast, and rumors circulated that either he committed suicide or his own soldiers in an uprising assassinated him. Tremendous rumors flying. On that specific Sunday morning, an announcement was made that Churchill's weekly broadcast will shortly resume. And the reason, the spokesman said, for his absence was due to the fact that he contracted a severe case of pneumonia, and doctors gave him no chance of survival. With nothing to lose, other doctors gave him an experimental drug named penicillin antibiotic, and he was miraculously cured. And in Yerushalayim, it was a foreign expression, so they had to repeat once, twice. Penicillin antibiotic. Penicillin antibiotic. So when this news spread to Yerushalayim, Dr. Yisraelis contacted the Rav Roshi, which was the Rav Yitzchak Herzog, and this was brought down in the journals of the Yitzchak Herzog. Since he had connections with the parliament in England, so they asked him if he could perhaps have them send a few bottles of this medication, the penicillin antibiotics, on the Sunday flight that came in every week, because then we still had in Eretz Israel the army of the English, and ammunitions came as well as medications. So perhaps part of the medical supplies that the airplane was bringing in could be this penicillin antibiotics. No, it arrived. They brought it over, these two bottles, to Dr. Yisraelis, and he administered it Sunday evening to Rebbetzin Frank. Monday, again, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Wednesday evening she was Kama, Mitosa, it's written in Hebrew, the journals of Yitzchak Herzog, she totally recovered. Unbelievable. And this is precisely the point that the Chazon Ish was trying to bring out. Why instantly do you reject? You find it very distant, the possibility, right, that in 4 days HaKadosh Baruch Hu will create the drug. He's a very refuah. All the refuahs, all the medications are created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu through his shluchim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said the Chazon Ish created 2/3 of the world, yesh meyayin, ex nihilo, from nothing, shibit nothing. So he can't create a medication. And this basically was a tiny, we don't understand it on sorry menu. Dako shibit dako, very, very delicate. Why do you, as it were, reject that in the realistic, factual world this can't take place? Why don't you believe it? Of course, this is only for that split second, by half a second. With tzaddikim, and in the outer limits of the Emuna, as far as Chachamim and Nevi'im is concerned, so we have over here one of the most remarkable insights in Torah wisdom. As we all know, the Isha Shunamis offered beautiful hospitality, complete hospitality to Elisha, the successor of Eliyahu Novi. She was an old lady, and Elisha wanted to show his gratitude, so he miraculously performed something which was entirely an anomaly. She had a son in her old age, just like Sarah Emuna. However, the son died. And when Elisha promised the Isha Shunamis, in her old age, she'll have a son, so he was begged by her, and he accepted. Not to disappoint, not to disillusion her, but the son should be a bar kayama, he should live and not die. Otherwise, she preferred not having a son. To have a son who dies in her lifetime was worse than not having a son, being barren, childless. And he promised her. And he died. She didn't tell her husband. She took her son and traveled with him to where Elisha was. And we have something remarkable. When the Ish Elikim, Elisha, saw the Isha Shunamis from the distance, he ran to greet her. The Emerlo Hashalom Loch, peace to you. Hashalom liishech, Hashalom layoled. He inquired about her health, husband's health, and the child's health. And she said, Shalom. And all of a sudden, he realized that the child had died because he saw that she was brokenhearted. Ki nafsha moralo. All of a sudden, Elisha was contrite. And he begged forgiveness from Elisha Shunamis for being so insensitive. But he said, Hashem helemi meni, for lo yihigid li. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hid the fact that the son had died, didn't reveal it to me. So that's why I asked, Hashalom layolet, is there peace to the child? Afterwards, we already know what happened, that Elisha revived the child miraculously. And he was a ben kayoma. She bowed down, took her son, and left to go back home. A remarkable story. She bowed down to the ground. So the Meshech Chochmah says one of the most remarkable insights you'll ever want to hear. Gehazi was under the impression that he would revive the child. He would bring him back from death. He'll be alive. He'll revive him. But he thought the schus was because of her hospitality. He made a mistake. What was the schus through which she merited that her son should be revived? The Emuna Tmimo that she had in the Novi. And because when you have faith in a great person, Tzaddik Yechye, so the Tzaddik will be Mechaye, the child. And that is why the Meshech Chochmah said HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to test the Emuna that the Isha Shunamis has in the Novi. Does she have Emunas Chachamim? Does she have Emunas Neviim? Because she needed that Emuna. She had to reach Emuna, the outer limits of Emuna, in order to have the schus to have her son revived. So what did the HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He concealed from Elisha the fact that the child died. He said, Hashalom liyeled. So right away she should have been disappointed in the Novi. The Novi doesn't know, says the Meshech Chochmah, that my son died. So why am I going to him if he doesn't know that the son died? What kind of prophet is he? He should have Ruach HaKodesh. He should know. So this should have hindered her. This should have been an impediment that she should not continue and implore Elisha to save her son. In other words, to revive her son. She had Emuna Tmimo. Says the great Meshech Chochmah, Nofal Melavovo Shum Chisor Emuna Banovi. Ki haben asher nosan lo yeben kayomo v'chayo yechye. Not for 1 second did she have a doubt. Not a second. Even though she saw he made a terrible mistake, an oversight. Right away, of course, Elisha said, Chotasi. He admitted that he made a mistake. He admitted that he should have known, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for some reason, concealed it. But he personally made a mistake, confessed it. But the great Shunam is not for one moment, despite the fact she had a Nisaya, she had a trial to see whether for a second it would fall one iota of her Emuna and the Novi. And it didn't. And because of that, Hechya Bino. That's why it does not say Vayishma Hashem B'Koil Elisha, because it was not the schus of Elisha, it was not the koyach of Elisha, it was not the prayer of Elisha that brought about the revival of the sun. It was her great Emuna, because she reached the outer limits of Emuna. And the great Briskerov said, based on this Meshech Chochmeh, that was also the Emuna of Chana. Wait. Eli, a Kohen Gadol, the role of the Kohen Gadol is to commiserate and to feel the pain and suffering of everyone. When she came to pray in Shiloh, she moved her lips and he thought she was a shikara, she was drunk. She corrected him. And what did Eli say? Not to worry, you will have a son next year. So the Briskerov cried every year when they read that Haftarah. He made such an egregious mistake. And he thought she was a shikara, she was praying. How is it that she relied totally? She never had a long face again. She never lost her hope. She was a revived woman. She prayed with a bitter heart, broken-hearted. She doesn't have a child. And afterwards, when Eli promised her that she will have a child, she believed him. She had faith in him, trust in him. He made a mistake. No, not for 1 second, said the Briskerov. Even after the mistake of Eli, he thought she was a shikayres. She still believed every single word of Eli HaKohen. Tremendous Emunas Chachamim, tremendous Emuna in the Nevi'im, despite the fact that it was a reason not to believe in them. And that's reaching the outer limits of Emuna. We have reached those outer limits of Emuna ourselves. And we hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the Emuna Tmima that we have will save us from any other tragedies. And the Gula Shlema, the ultimate redemption, Mashiach Tzidkenu, should come about